Tuesday, December 13th. You're listening to Weather with Enthusiasm. The weather map is quite remarkable this evening, including the forecast, as we see a backwards forecast starting to develop. Here's a weather map synopsis discussion from the National Weather Service. A 30.6-inch high over Hudson Bay is extending 30.4-inch ridging over Lake Superior through Tuesday afternoon. Low pressure will build briefly to 29.3 inches over the Central Plains by Tuesday night, before slowly weakening on Wednesday as it tracks to Iowa and Minnesota. The low will then deepen again, becoming 29.4 inches as it moves into the upper Great Lakes region by late Thursday. The low is then expected to weaken slightly to 29.5 inches by Friday before moving east away from the area Saturday. It will leave behind a 29.6-inch trough over Lake Superior. We have a storm system that's developing off of Colorado. The system's going to push northeast. It's actually going to make a lot of turns, and at some point even almost make a U-turn, kind of. The system moves northeast, north-northeast, then east-northeast. Eventually it starts to move southeast, but then north. Precipitation associated with this system will actually at some point start to move west. Now, what's going on over here is we have a blocking high, which is taking place just to the east of the storm. So the storm intensifies, and then the thing becomes blocked. So it becomes stationary. The following is the hazardous weather outlook for portions of western and north central Nebraska from the National Weather Service, issued at 3:31 p.m. Mountain Standard Time or 4:31 p.m. Central Standard Time, December 12, 2022. This is for portions of western and north central Nebraska. A powerful winter storm will begin to impact portions of western and north central Nebraska tonight. Leading up to the onset of wintry precipitation, thunderstorms are possible generally south of Highway 2 from Antioch, Antioch to Dunning, and south of Highway 91 from Dunning to Erickson. South of Interstate 80, there is a marginal threat for severe thunderstorms. Hail up to quarter size is the main threat. Overnight tonight, wintry precipitation will begin to develop roughly along and west of Highway 61. A mix of freezing rain or sleet will transition quickly to snow in these areas. The biggest shockaroo we have right now is probably the severe weather potential for this evening. Now, where do you think the severe weather potential would be? Everybody knows, right? It's the southeast portion of the storm system. It's always the southeast portion of the storm system. It's always Shreveport, Louisiana, Texas, and Arkansas. Well, today, that's not the area that's in the southeast portion. Today, it's more like Texas and Oklahoma, even portions of southern Kansas. Tomorrow, it starts to affect that area, the Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas. But we have another portion of this storm system that the National Weather Service tells us is now under a severe weather risk. And it's on the back side of the storm. Unbelievable. The back side of the storm is the cold side of the storm. That's where the heavy snow takes place, and we have plenty of it over here. I do think the severe weather potential, which I don't know if anybody's talking about other than the National Weather Service in North Plains, Nebraska, but it's real. They're the local meteorologists, so they got to know about this, and there could be some hail, damaging hail or wind gusts. I think hail might be the main concern for this evening. They have instability could be strong enough to produce that. Followings from the National Weather Service in Boston. An area of low pressure will develop off the mid-Atlantic coast on Thursday and move up the eastern seaboard Thursday night into Friday. A storm system is expected to develop on the East Coast in response to this storm system. That happens a lot. You get a low pressure system a lot of times off the North Carolina coast or somewhere around there. It forms in response to the system in the Midwest, and then it moves north. That system is going to be producing a classic Midwest snowfall. It's not in the Midwest. It's going to be on the East Coast. You're going to have to wait till you get to New England, that far north, before you feel the effects of it. But the classic Midwest bullseye storm of 6 to 12 inches. The storm here in the Midwest will be getting the classic nor'easter, but it's in the Midwest, plus some additional wind speeds as well, because it happens to be taking place in the plains. So you really get phenomenal wind speeds with this one. Really phenomenal. It's almost like we're getting damaging wind gusts with the blizzard conditions that are forecasted to happen. That's what happens when you get something which would be like a nor'easter taking place in the plains. So we have the Midwest storm headed for New England, and we have the nor'easter, which is moving into the upper Midwest and the plains. We have a lot of other crazy stuff going on here as well. We also have some wild stuff going on out in Arizona and New Mexico, where they're issuing snow squall warnings for life-threatening snow squalls. The reason these are life-threatening is because visibility is zero, plus they happen very abrupt and sudden. So there's no way to really know, if you're on a highway, you really can't go that fast because you might have to stop suddenly at any moment. This is not the time to be on the road during a snow squall. This is taking place out in our desert southwest area, probably the higher elevations, but we have that snow squall warning. We have just a multitude of low pressure systems, which are all really kind of going to end up being the same storm. Low pressure off in California. It's connected to the low pressure in Colorado. We have copious amounts of Gulf moisture, of course, coming off of the Gulf of Mexico, dew points in the 60s. That's what you could expect. And this storm system doesn't need to be a panhandle hook. The panhandle hooks, at least here in Chicago and many places, those are usually the storms that produce the most snow. Those are the low pressure systems. They develop probably around Colorado or Oklahoma, but probably more like the Oklahoma Panhandle, but also, somewhere around there. They could develop in Colorado, but then they go south. They take a storm track initially a little bit south, like a hook. They move like a hook, and that gives this storm ample time to collide with Gulf moisture. Those are the storm systems that produce the heaviest snow in the Midwest. If you're going to be getting a 1 to 2 foot storm, which is this one, it's like a nor'easter quality storm. If you're going to be getting that, it's usually going to be from a panhandle hook. For the plains, I've noticed that it seems to be they play by different rules over there, because this is not the first Colorado low that has been producing. Even recently, this is not the first one. There's been a pattern that they seem to be producing 24 inches of snow. We had one several weeks ago, in fact, when the winter was young, the season was young. We had one there. Another big shockaroo that's going on this evening is the fact that temperatures were in the 60s at least in portions of South Dakota yesterday, and these are the places which are going to be experiencing the blizzard warning. Forecasters are challenged with this snow as well. This general synoptic setup there's high confidence in that there will be a blizzard, there will be heavy snow, snowfall accumulations of about 2 feet. In some locations, 1 to 2 feet. But there's also a lot of complexity. The complexity, we explained that in the previous podcast. Various dry slots, precipitation types in the beginning, and things like that. We also have the Black Hills. So the north slopes of the Black Hills, that's where the snow amounts could end up being more than 2 feet in South Dakota, very close to Rapid City. But areas just to the south of that could end up getting significantly less than any place else. That's kind of similar to what happens with thunder snow. Thunder snow is also a possibility. Several more inches of snow fall when you have thunder snow, but then right after the thunder snow, those counties get several inches less than the surrounding locations. So on average, you could end up with a certain amount, but you could get 13 inches on average, but within a short distance from each other, you have snowfall amounts of 8 inches to 20 inches, and then you end up on average, well, in that case, on average, you get 14 inches. That's something that could be happening in portions of South Dakota. So you have the Nebraska thing with the severe weather potential, which usually happens in the spring, and that's going to become a heavy snow event later on. And there's a lot of stuff to monitor with this. There also could be some counties, as we pointed out in the previous podcast, where the forecast actually becomes a bust. That's if there's any failure to really pin down exactly where these dry slots are going to be. It's interesting that a dry slot will change the snow over to drizzle. And if you want to know why, it's complex, and you have to, I once spoke about it in a podcast. It shouldn't. You would think it shouldn't. There's no warm air up there. It's not because there's warm air. So the question is, why would it be falling as a drizzle? And it has to do something with the nuclei it's necessary for a snowflake to form. If that's not there, so then the snowflake does not form, even though temperatures are much colder than 32. And this was a huge shocker to me when I learned about it. And it's possible there's a detail or two that I have off. Anyone who's interested in that could look it up, but it's very interesting stuff. In fact, there might even be in the title of that podcast, I think there's the name Freezing Drizzle. So you could do a search for it. Maybe I should have listened to it before. But that's something, you have the drizzle, it's not because there's any warm air up there. Now, you could have surface temperatures above 32, but we're going to see temperatures dropping quite quickly in those areas that get the snow. I think much of the country really is going to be focused on the life-threatening situation taking place of the tornadoes. We also have 32 different advisories and warnings that have been issued by the National Weather Service for this evening. They're really going wild with their warnings. We don't have any tornado stuff yet. But we do have, again, those snow squall warnings. We have an avalanche warning. We have winter storm watches, winter storm warnings. We have blizzard warnings. I don't have the thing in front of me, but I'm just listing, with all the warnings. We have almost everything you would think of. We just don't have the tornado warnings or any severe thunderstorm warnings as of an hour ago. Perhaps things have changed, but we have lots of high wind watches and warnings and lots of things like that. The blizzard is really over in portions of South Dakota and even portions of Nebraska and Wyoming. That's really where you get the blizzard conditions. We have some other unique stuff. This is unique stuff that's going to be going on with this storm, and it's unique in the way that the National Weather Service is responding to it as well in the warnings that they're issuing. and it just brings back the memories of things, that they've issued many years ago. We have counties that have blizzard warnings for areas which are not even receiving 6 inches of snow. This is a reminder that people in Alaska never need, because there are times they have blizzard warnings when the sun is out. But here in this part of the country, the blizzard warnings tend to occur during major snowfalls. But when you have wind gusts as high as they're forecast to be, close to damaging wind gusts, a storm producing 2 to 5 inches of snow, you could end up with enough blowing snow to reduce visibility to 1/4 mile or less for several consecutive hours. And that's all that's needed for a blizzard warning to take place. And that's probably why you have Blizzard Alley taking place up there in the Dakotas. That's Blizzard Alley. They get the most blizzards out of any other place in this country, maybe even, I don't know about Alaska. And we also have winter storm warnings for places that are only getting 1 to 3 inches of snow. And these are northern areas, places which are used to the snow. And the National Weather Service, again, is saying that we're dealing with very strong winds. So it's winter storm warning criteria. That's the story over here. So a lot of unique, interesting stuff. We've mentioned plenty of shakaroos over here. Let's see what other shakaroos we could come up with. We've already done, maybe the third time already, the backwards storm systems. The storm track is just really strange. I think also on the back side of this low pressure system, the forecasters, what they're dealing with is a little bit strange. It seems like you have forecasts with high confidence, but yet the forecasts are different. We're going to have a setup, especially for the plains, a setup which is going to bring Arctic air for several blasts of Arctic air into the plains well into next week, midweek, even the end of the week. In the Dakotas, they're getting plenty of Arctic air. So if they're getting Arctic air, even if that air moderates some, by the time it reaches, let's say here in Chicago, we're still going to be dealing with very cold temperatures. And, the East Coast, you're just going to have to say that the temperatures are going to moderate, as they usually do, by the time they reach the East Coast. The air is not directly from the Arctic, at least initially. But we're dealing with wind chills. Wind chills now might be reaching wind chill advisory criteria in the plains. So the cold is intensifying with 20 below zero wind chills for the weekend, afternoon highs in the single digits as we head into the early parts of next week. This is for the northern plains. And, whatever is there does move here into the Chicago area, although a moderated form of it. But those cold fronts do tend to move here. And, I just did think of an explanation for what might be going on in the East Coast if they don't end up getting really cold air for next week. It's probably due to some type of blocking weather pattern again. This is not the first time we've had it this year. I think we need to figure out why it keeps happening. Why does this keep happening? This is something that happens in the summer. Of course, it happens in the winter as well. But it's not, I don't think that's a normal thing. The weather patterns are more progressive in the winter, and you have a setup where these storms are getting trapped here in the middle part of the country. And at the same time, though, the East Coast is getting a storm system that will be moving up the coast, affecting those areas. If the storm should move further out to sea, then a place like Boston could end up getting the heavier snow. As of now, the heavier snow will be going well west of Boston. And in fact, most of the precipitation might even be rain, especially for most of the East Coast. As of right now, that's what it looks like. The storm track is going to help determine that. We have dew points in the 60s in the South states. What else could you expect? We have the severe weather risk at a 3 once again similar to what it was like 2 weeks ago. However, we have a larger variety of high-level risk severe weather forecast to take place in the south central states. For one thing, the last time around, the main threat was tornadoes. This time around, tornadoes remain a main threat, but damaging wind gusts, not just to 60 miles per hour, but to 70 miles per hour. Some storms, even 80 miles per hour is a possibility, and it's not even a low risk. Also, large damaging hail is also part of what could be happening with the south central states. These things are expected to happen during the nighttime hours. Part of that is due to the fact that the sun is setting so early. So even the peak heating during the day, there's very little time. Right after the peak heating, within a short period of time, it's already dark out. But even with that, even if we were to say take that out, there's the potential for tornadoes to occur even after midnight in some of these locations. So like Shreveport, Louisiana, Houston, Texas, New Orleans, Louisiana, Little Rock, Arkansas. Those are places, the bullseye for the system. For tonight, you have like Dallas, Texas, probably Dallas. You probably have some places in Kansas, perhaps Dodge City, Kansas, and you have portions of Oklahoma. The severe weather tonight is not as intense as it's going to be tomorrow night. And the question is, which we always ask, is what's going to happen after this? What's going to happen after this? And I really think it's difficult. The difficulty is these blocking highs, and until they break down, it becomes hard to forecast what's going to happen afterwards. And that, I think, could be affecting the forecast, especially for people on the East Coast. And they're much closer to the blocking high. We could talk about the 5 snowstorms that affect us. We can make it more educational. We could do that. We could use this forecast as a springboard to discuss a lot of interesting topics, such as cloud seeding, because what's happening in the Nebraska area or possibly South Dakota with those thunderstorms, if they should form. So then you get heavier snow in that area, less snow in the other area. So the mayor of Moscow many years ago wanted to use the same approach he promised a winter free of snow in Moscow. He wanted to be elected. He promised that, and his approach was going to be to hire the Russian military to cloud seed the clouds just to the west of Moscow, so there would not be much snow, perhaps no snow, by the time the clouds hit Moscow. And it seemed like it was working, but then by midwinter, Moscow got a historical snowstorm, something that they've never seen before. So, that's an interesting stuff. And then you can go on to talk about the United Arab Emirates, which is a country that also, they do cloud seeding, but they do not use chemicals. They use electric drones to cloud seed their clouds. They also don't do it for the purpose of precipitation. They do it for the purpose of cooling down the temperatures, despite the fact that it creates more humidity. They have an interesting approach, and it sounds like the safest approach because you're not using the chemicals. And also, why are forecasters in the upper plains able to forecast all the way to the December 25th holiday? They're saying that things look Arctic cold for that area, that's weeks away. And in other places, they're really struggling. A number of weather apps actually have been showing warm weather for December, for the final week of December. These apps have been showing that for several weeks already, and it hasn't been changing. I don't know where those apps get their weather information from. But you would think if there's cold air in the plains that should at least be impacting Chicago to some extent. Perhaps maybe not places further to the south. You have been listening to the podcast Weather with Enthusiasm. You will now hear a 1-minute trailer. Several additional feet of snow is expected by Monday morning. We have a powerhouse typhoon which has developed off in the Pacific Ocean. A big shockaroo to many of you. This is especially true in regards to what's going to be going on in Alaska. We have parts of the world that are so hot right now. Temperatures are expected to go into the low 130s. Hey, we have a special guest on our show. What is your name?
Katabis.
A heat wave that's going to be headed to the Eilat area. We're going to have to wait before we get into the next excitement. We're going from one extreme to the next extreme. 27.1 barometric pressure. Feet of snow are falling in Japan.
Oh my gosh.
Weather. That's a time of celebration. Just Google weather with enthusiasm and they're all going to come up.